All right, I'm gonna get started. Rob, are you ready? I'm just gonna.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Rob Shesol graduated from UPenn's Wharton in 1995 and has been passionate about business and finance ever since. He started out as a financial analyst at an investment banking firm known as Solomon Smith Barney, where he worked for just under 3 years and transitioned into private equity and venture capitalism. He's created numerous businesses ever since and currently focuses on Splash Carwash in China, China's first ever environmentally oriented automatic car wash operator. It is also the only car wash business that is a partner of the Chinese government. Splash now is the largest deal pipeline in the global car wash industry and is in the process of aggressively expanding its network of car wash facilities across China. If you have any questions during Rob's lecture, please message them directly to me via Zoom's chat feature. I'll try my best to ask Mr. Shesol all the questions I receive at the end of the lecture. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Rob Shesol.
Okay. Thank you, Sher. That was actually, you have more information there than I realized you had access to, so well done. Yeah, well, thank you for everybody who's tuning in. Greetings from Prague. So I'm gonna start with this hour by sharing with you a story about my worst workday ever. It was Valentine's Day 2006. The private equity fund that I was working for in Prague had recently acquired a Slovak manufacturing company. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy, so we knew we had a restructuring, but we thought we had the right person. We had hired a CEO to come along with us, who was originally from Slovakia, an older gentleman in his 60s. He had then moved to Canada, was running manufacturing companies for the whole time, for about 20 years in Canada. So we thought, he's got great experience, learned, proper practices for running a business in the West, but nonetheless, he understands Slovak culture, Slovak language. So we were, really optimistic about what he was able to do. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of energy to run a company with 500 people, and regrettably, he didn't have it. And we discovered fairly quickly into his tenure, also, he had pretty poor financial judgment. And so it became evident pretty quickly that this wasn't going to work. And so the investors in my fund, because unfortunately I had responsibility for this project, and so the investors instructed me that I needed to fire him and to find a replacement and then fire him. So I did this. I found what I thought would be the perfect replacement. Actually, a former CEO of the business who had moved on, and he was very successful while he was running the company, very well liked. And so, we were really optimistic about what we could do with him in the position of leadership. And so I had a very awkward dinner with the original CEO that we had brought in. Had to tell him we were letting him go. He cried a lot. It was a very awkward dinner, but nonetheless, the next day our new CEO was supposed to be beginning, and I was, really kind of optimistic about finally getting off on the right foot. Well, so the next day, actually, he never showed up, and he stopped answering any of my calls. I've been working with him intensely for about 3 weeks on his contracts, on the business plan, and then he just never answered my phone calls again, ever. So I explained all of this to the investors, and they basically said, okay, well, while we get this all sorted, I needed to step in as acting CEO of the business and to run it until we had this sorted out and we had somebody new who was able to take over the company. Mind you, I had never spent a day working in manufacturing, and I didn't speak Slovak. There were about 2 English speakers in the company of 500 people. So I took on the position of acting CEO and started to inquire as to what had happened, and learned quickly that there was a local investor who wanted to buy the company, and they didn't like the fact that this foreign group owned it. And so they had conspired with the individual that we had tried to hire, basically to tank the company, force us to leave with our tail between our legs, and then they could come in, buy the company from us at a significant discount, and then they could put him in as CEO, turn the company around, and they would benefit. in learning about this, I also discovered that the sales team was complicit, and actually the sales team had stopped it stopped selling. They stopped filling the order book. And so as my very first day of acting CEO, I then had to fire our entire sales team. So I was responsible for a company of 500 people in an industry that I didn't know anything about, in a language that I couldn't speak. Mind you, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. We had no orders and, of course, no sales team to try to fill any of those orders or generate any revenues. So why am I starting with this story? Well, primarily because I think there are actually useful parallels between what I was facing at that point in time and your own situations. Although I certainly hope your current situations are far less desperate and with far less betrayal than I was facing at that point in time. But with your, as I understand, you're all, I think, right at the end or late stages of high school. And as you're looking forward to your careers, you're full of goals, you're full of aspirations, but you don't really have much clarity on what path you're going to take to get there. And you certainly, I'm sure, feel that you're missing a lot of the skills that you need to achieve your objectives. And this isn't to say that you're not optimistic, driven, motivated, but a lot of questions remain, a lot of key questions remain unanswered, and that can be fairly intimidating as you're looking forward, thinking about these things. This is how you deal with these significant questions and challenges, and really how you look at this blank screen that's in front of you and create what you want upon it is the same thing that I was dealing with at that point in time, although certainly with much more urgency and desperation. I felt that I was confident in my own abilities. I certainly didn't want to disappoint the investors who would put this responsibility on my shoulders, but I really had no idea of how I was going to do it and what I was going to achieve, or how I was going to achieve what I needed to achieve, which was really keeping the company alive, and then ultimately building it back up and into a stable position, and ultimately then profitable position. So this is this is kind of why I think I've tried to think about the best way to structure what I'm doing, and I'm going to be speaking mostly about the entrepreneurial phase of my career, but that's really what being an entrepreneur is. You're filled with goals, you're filled with aspirations, but there's no path. You have to create the path, and it's really it's completely what's inside your mind and what's inside you that determines the level of success you're going to have in achieving that and what you can ultimately create. And it's the same thing with yourselves and your careers and the aspirations you have. So before I get deeper into this point again, let me back up and give you a little bit more detail on myself. I think you did a good job. I'll give you a little bit more, put a little bit more meat on the bones. I'm calling you from Prague. I'm talking about the company I'm running in China, but I am American. I grew up in Denver. As I mentioned, I then went to Penn. And actually, when I got to Penn, I had no interest in business. I'd never thought about it. I was interested in medicine. My dad was a surgeon. I thought that was a cool and interesting career. I also loved history, so I started working on a history degree. But the exposure to Wharton there kind of opened my eyes to business. And so I started taking courses there and ultimately wound up doing a dual degree with finance in Wharton and diplomatic history in the college. But still didn't really know much about kind of what I wanted to do with that. And so a natural track from Wharton, which is really a strong school in finance, is to go to Wall Street, investment banking. So I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. Took a job at what was then Salomon Brothers. It's Salomon Smith Barney. Went through a lot of different names and corporate structures. It's now Citigroup. And if you're familiar with how investment banking is, it's divided up into industry groups. And so I was in real estate and lodging industry group. And actually, at the time I joined, we were one of the smaller groups. My year, we only hired 4 analysts, where in comparison, our healthcare group, which was the #1 group in terms of revenue that year, hired 25 analysts. And so, but we wound up outperforming healthcare that year. Our industry took off once we got there. And so we wound up, I had the fortune, but also a bit of misfortune of closing 37 deals in 36 months. So I was exposed to a lot, I learned a lot, but it was brutal. I really was quite burned out. And so decided after 3 years that I'd had enough. I was also a bit, investment banking didn't kind of tick on my boxes. I really was deep into the business, and I thought that was where I thought, things were more interesting. So I decided that private equity would be a good way to because then you're buying the company, so you're responsible for every aspect of it. You have to understand everything about operations. So that was what I decided I wanted to do. But I needed a little breather after my time in investment banking. I mean, I was going 3 months without a day off, working 20 hours a day. So really needed some time. So I went to Europe for 2 months to clear my head, and really loved Europe. That was the first time I'd spent some time there. And so went back to New York, interested in private equity, but also interested in perhaps seeing if there were any opportunities in Europe. I found a private equity job in Dublin, which at the time this was in 1998. It was, if you've heard the term Celtic Tiger, Ireland was booming. The economy was really taking off, and it was a really fascinating place to be. So we were setting up what was the largest private equity fund in Ireland at the time. So that was great. We did a lot of deals in Ireland. We were focused also in England, Northern Europe, like so France, Belgium, Netherlands. But unfortunately, the relations weren't great between the Irish partners and the American investors. So there wasn't going to be a second fund. And so it was clear after we fully invested that fund in 2 years that I needed to look for something else. And so I was interested in staying in the investment world, but I really liked the developing markets, and I really liked Europe. So at that time, Prague and Budapest, this is now 2000, Prague and Budapest were really the most interesting and dynamic markets in Europe. And so that's where I looked, and I wound up getting an offer to run a venture capital fund in Prague. And so, but the lines are a little bit more blurred in some of these developing markets than they are in a place like New York. And so we were doing other things too. We were also setting up some companies. The main investor in our fund was a serial entrepreneur, and he got most of his money from a telecom business he had founded and exited. So as part of our team, we also set up, we started a number of businesses. We started up the Czech Credit Bureau, which is still the only credit bureau Czech Republic. We set up the first mortgage broker. So that was my first kind of taste of being an entrepreneur. I mean, I should also, not only was I not interested in business when I got to Penn, but when I was studying at Wharton, there was plenty of entrepreneurial courses, which I didn't take a single one of them. It didn't interest me at all. Didn't think I had what it took. Didn't think it fit my personality type. So or my skill set. And so once again, I gained exposure to this, and it was interesting. But I stayed with venture capital. That group then started investing more in real estate, which I wasn't that interested in, and so I jumped back into private equity with the group that was out of London. This is where we did the deal, but I was based in Central Europe. This is the deal that the machinery manufacturer I started with. It was done through that. So we did build that company back up. I did. I wound up as acting CEO for 2.5 years. And really what I did, the first thing I did was I realized I obviously needed sales. I had exposure to a salesman from another competitor, or actually from a supplier of ours, through the work I had done with the business, and I reached out and hired him. There was another guy who was involved in another company who was deeply experienced, and so I reached out and recruited him. So I was kind of cherry picking from people I had contact with to build a team around myself, because I didn't, as I said, I didn't speak Slovak, and I didn't know the first thing about manufacturing, but I needed to make the company work. I needed a strong team around me, so that was where I started. And step by step, we did turn up around the company, and then we ultimately sold it at the end of 2008. And for those of you who now know your fairly ancient history, that was the beginning of the financial crisis, so it wasn't a great time to be looking for a job. So that was when I just thought I would kind of take it easy and start a couple of my own projects. And so that was where Splash accidentally came out of. I actually was pissed off about getting a bad car wash. In Prague, there was just two solutions, really, kind of the low-quality car washes at gas stations and these very expensive hand washes. I went to one of the hand washes. They did a terrible job, and I basically said I could do a better job myself. And so researching the car wash industry, we recognized that there was these much more sophisticated business models that were in places like the US and Germany, and thought, I'll be the guy who brings it to Central Europe. So I started working on the business actually in Central Europe, had a great deal with McDonald's. We had a right of first refusal on their development sites, with Metro, which is actually the Costco of Europe, similar type arrangement, and had an agreement with a US-based private equity fund. And so everything was going great. We started work on our first site. We're finishing up the deal with the private equity fund, and then something that I thought had no connection to my business and really actually didn't happen. Russia invaded Crimea. The private equity group was spooked. We were just finishing the deal. They were very conservative. They were afraid that Russia was going to try to invade what they called Czechoslovakia, and it was going to cause problems for the business. And so they said they wanted to sit out and wait and see how things settled down. So we had already started construction on our first site. It was a pretty catastrophic turn of events for me. So while I was scrambling, looking to find an investor, was introduced to my now business partner in China. I reached him through some mutual friends. He went to college in LA and knew some people there who introduced us. They introduced us as a potential investor. We started talking, realized that there was a good opportunity to actually do the business in China. We took my business model, brought it over at the beginning of 2014, and we're very lucky that at that point, when we didn't know it at the time, but the Chinese government had actually red flagged the car wash sector as problematic for pollution and wasting water, and had instructed municipal governments that it needed to be cleaned up, but there was no real idea how to do that. We stepped onto the stage. We wound up getting invited into a citywide joint venture, a city that borders on Shanghai, and as an exclusive joint venture partner. And so that kind of opened the door to all the government relations we have. As Shrey mentioned, we now have the largest development pipeline in the global history of the car wash industry. We've got exclusivity for a chunk of Shanghai that's the size of London. We are working with a number of other municipalities in Shanghai, in China, including Wuhan, and then from that was easy to springboard and start working with some of the state-owned companies who are cooperating with the state utility company and the two largest state petrol companies, which are three of the four largest companies in the world. So really, one bag car wash in Prague has now evolved into. We're certainly not there yet, but we're building about 20 new locations a month now, and so realistically, within maybe a year and a half, 2 years, we can actually become perhaps the largest car wash company in the world by that point. That's certainly our goal. So it's a really exciting opportunity, and actually through the government cooperation we're doing with the government of China, they approached us and asked if we could help bring other foreign companies to China, since we, as a foreigner, I hadn't navigated the government relationships quite well. And so we've set up a separate company called Outreach, which is a platform for helping other foreign companies to enter that market. We have a deal with Alibaba where we're helping them to enter online, but then also through Outreach platform, we're also helping, companies who want to physically set up there. We're helping them negotiate with the government. So it's turned into it's become a really exciting, evolution, really very unforeseen. So say most of the time I'm in China, but I got out when they started shutting cities down for COVID, and now I'm unable to get back at the moment. But fortunately, my Chinese partner is running the businesses there, and I'm more in touch constantly, and I'm responsible for fundraising. So I know getting back to kind of the presentation, when you listen to somebody at my stage of their career, summarizing 20 years of work in a couple of minutes, it all seems to flow very well. There seems to be a logical progression of experiences, but of course, that's not at all how it works. Nothing in life plays out in such a smooth and predictable manner. And a lot of times when you're dealing with these questions, you have no idea what direction you're going to head, and you have certainly even less idea, how the decisions you make are going to, play out and impact your future, your life, your business. So that brings me back to, where I started with this, business with the manufacturer, when I stepped in as acting CEO, and also your own situations now, where you're really at this point where you're, looking forward, you're full of aspirations and goals, but there's no clear, there's no clear path in front of you, and you're trying to, grasp at what you have and figure out, how to define that and how to create that path. So, so I'm going to spend the rest of my presentation talking about my entrepreneurial experience. First of all, because your associates asked me to talk about business through an entrepreneurial lens, and I don't want to disappoint them. But also, I think it's one of the most intense types of professional experiences you can have, since you're responsible for everything. And so for any of you interested in business, there's going to be some link to what I have to do as an entrepreneur. I'm responsible for everything from finance to marketing to business development to strategy, planning, IT, so there's nothing that, you can do in business that doesn't have, some application when you're building and running your own business. Also, I've spent, I think, the way I know Shrey, I spent 9 years teaching an entrepreneurial management course, summer course I've done it actually at Oxford, at Cambridge, and at Columbia, and I see every year that a vast majority of my students have at least some interest in starting their own business at some point in their lives. And so I think that, again, it's probably one of the most relevant things that I can talk to you about. So I'm going to now pull up, okay, so you guys can see that? You can see the slides? Sure, okay, cool. So I'll put them on my, showing off our little Splash logo in the corner, although this is not a Splash presentation. But I want to walk you through, in a fairly expedited manner, some of the key things, I think, if you have, any remote interest about ultimately, running your, having your own business, building your own business one day. So, so starting with what it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur, the most important thing to recognize, because, when you think about what it means to be an entrepreneur, you think about what the actual idea is. But really the most important thing is the execution of that idea, or what 99% of your responsibility becomes. And so you see, the only thing I have capitalized on this page is passion. And you absolutely can't go anywhere without passion as an entrepreneur, because you are the engine that moves everything. And so if you are, complacent, if you're not driven, you're not going to be able to push anything along with you. So you have to have that passion, and that is just underlying for every aspect of being an entrepreneur. And so and one thing I would say about that is the passion has to come from somewhere. And so, for some of you, it might be the idea itself. Maybe you love medicine, maybe something biotech, so it's creating something, it's solving some problem. That's really what fires you up. I must say that, I was never passionate about washing cars, but what really excites me is the opportunity we have with Splash and be able to build a market-leading company in a country like China, to take on the challenge of a place like China and be successful there. And so that's where I find my passion. And so, it needs to come from somewhere. You have to find something that really fires you up, or else you're not going to be able to take on all the tasks that you have as an entrepreneur. The other, the next thing, persistence, certainly, because everything will take longer. It'll be more complicated. It'll be more costly than you ever expected. I've been part of starting about 20, 25 different businesses in different capacities, and not one of them has been easier, quicker, or cheaper than we expected. So, you're going to, without a doubt, you're going to have obstacles. And so, you need the passion to be persistent, but persistence is really, Splash, I could have walked away when our investor walked away when I was looking in Europe, and the whole China thing would have never happened. And there's many other examples I can give like that, where it was just my, determination to stick to it, persevere, and just find a solution that actually, in most cases, created a bigger opportunity than than the issue I was dealing with at that moment. Another thing that's really key for being an entrepreneur is your comfort for dealing with uncertainty, risk, and also making assumptions. And assumptions, is a way to kind of overcome the uncertainty, because nothing is mapped out in front of you, and a lot of stuff is on your shoulders. I mean, you as an entrepreneur, you might be pushing yourself to the absolute limit financially. You might have no money left of your savings, max out your credit card. You might have to borrow from your parents, have your crying mother frightened as she's giving you money from her retirement savings, that if you lose this, you're gonna impact her bill. You might talk people with families that leaving, good stable jobs into coming into something where there's absolutely no, guarantee that anything's going to work. These are the things that you regularly are dealing with as an entrepreneur, and so it's stressful as all hell. And so you're not only just creating this business that excited you, you are having to take on issues like this on a daily basis, and so. It's normal. A lot of people aren't comfortable in these types of scenarios. And so, but this is really at the heart of what being an entrepreneur is. And so if you are excited by the idea of doing something early, but, this stuff freaks you out, you can still join a business, once it's a little bit more later stage, once it's kind of proven, and you can be part of that early stage and that growth, but maybe not taking on the responsibility yourself. The next few things: self-starter, willingness to work hard, self-discipline. I mean, these all factor into that, because again, you're driving the bus. You are taking everybody along for the ride with you. And so you can't look to anybody. Certainly, it's common to start a business with partners, and you kind of feed off each other, and you're going to have different strengths. And sometimes you push each other through moments when you're down. But if this isn't in you, naturally, your partners aren't going to want to have to motivate you every day or every challenge, and so they're going to expect that you're going to take responsibility for what you need to do. You're going to do it. You're going to put everything you have into it. And so all these, again, I just keep drawing to this: you are the engine, you are the driver. And so if you need a push to make things, to be able to work effectively, maybe this isn't right. And also, not only that, you don't have to do this just for yourself, but you are bringing everybody along with you. You're bringing the investors, you're bringing, your customers, you're bringing your employees. And so you really have to not just be able to manage this within your own mind, but you have to really be able to, convincingly bring other people along with you. And so, again, everybody is not cut out for this. And I would say, certainly also looking, talking to a group at your age, I would have looked at this list and say, this doesn't describe me at all. So, don't worry if you don't see yourself in this now when you really want to start your own business. You will evolve and you'll grow into this, and you'll build confidence, you'll build experience, and you'll start to, see how you can take some of this on. So I wouldn't make these judgments now or even for a number of years, but I would certainly register in the back of your mind, what it takes. And, and also, if you really feel like even after that period, it's not in you, everything you do is under a magnifying glass. You're at the focal point of everything. And so investors, customers, employees, partners, everything is focused, you're involved in. And so if you're missing skills, if you don't have some of this, you can't fake it. And so if you really want to be an entrepreneur, but deep down, you just really you're not comfortable with a lot of this. You should figure out another way, maybe to follow your dreams, but not to expose yourself in that kind of way. Oops. So okay, that's kind of who you are. Those are the traits. Now to talk some about how to position yourself to really make the business happen. I think one of the most important things in life is to be honest with yourself and to understand yourself. And this is, I'm advising, people I know who are in their 40s, who are changing jobs, people are deciding whether or not to go back to medical school, law school later in life and stuff. And like a lot of people come to me because I've done a lot, and also because I've been teaching, so I'm kind of used to talking people through some of these things. And this is the foundation for everything. You have to be honest with yourself. And the way to actually do this effectively is you have to look, and it's not an immediate process. This takes years, but if you have to kind of think about it and take it seriously over a course of time. And so you have to build an accurate picture of yourself. And so you have to see yourself through a lot of different situations. You have to see how you performed, how you felt, but just that isn't enough. What you really have to do is get to a more granular level. You have to think about, well, why? And that's the most important question, is the why. And so you look at, this job, this class, that class, this situation, this responsibility, this role, and you're going to like things, you're going to have done well, you're going to poorly, you're going to, be happy, full range for everything. And it's only when you ask yourself why, you start to, well, maybe it was the prestige, maybe it was the people you worked with, maybe it was easy, maybe, it naturally fits with some of your skills, maybe there was, you were recognized and rewarded for what you've done. Maybe it was, financial. There's going to be, and once you go through a lot of these things and you keep thinking about things in this way, you start to put together a very accurate picture of yourself, and then it becomes very easy to make decisions for yourself about work, about life, about education, about fundamental decisions that you're making, because you understand what you're good at and what you're not good at. And so, and you understand your skills and you understand your interests and your likes. And so then you can just really boil decisions down to their core and really figure out, how that relates to you and your skill set and your interests. But if you lie to yourself, if you're doing, medicine because your parents wanted you to be a doctor, but you have absolutely no interest of it, you're never making honest decisions, and you're never making decisions that really reflect yourself. And so you're never going to be able to, accurately represent yourself. And, maybe you are, interested in finance, but you're not good with math. Well, you can't fake that continuously and be happy. You're going to be stressed because you're going to feel like you're underperforming. There's going to be a lot of, negative, maybe, maybe your performance reviews will be poor. So this is the core of everything. And it's the core, so if you're effective in doing this, and again, it's a gradual process, it's years. But if you take it seriously, if you do it effectively, then, it allows you to be much more effective in every decision and every action that you take. And so, this is where, recognizing it's both strengths and weaknesses. So I'm good at this, I excel in this. So certain things come up with Splash, and I'm just like, this is my area. I'm good at this. I need to be the one taking control of this, or I need, I have to convince other people to follow this path because I get this better than the rest of them do. This is my area. Other times there's areas that are not my area at all. And I realize that. And so I'm like, I need to be listening to other people's opinions. I should trust their opinions more than I trust my judgment. And so that's where I say, acknowledge your weaknesses, address or mitigate them. Certainly just don't give up and say, oh, I'm not good at this, and so I'm never going to do it again. You're young and you should be working on improving, but we're all different. And there's certain areas that you just don't naturally, some people are introverts, and so they're not going to be, effective salespeople, but they could be, incredible with, more, analytical jobs or something. And so you find your space, and what you do has to kind of conform to really your natural skill set. And so that's what I mean by mitigate it. I mean, so there's areas where my partner is much better than me, and so, I let him totally run the show. There's areas where we both acknowledge my skills, so we do, and it's the same thing. And so, if you don't have it, and you need to find somebody who does, and you need to be listening to their opinion. If it's really your area, shine and show people that this is, an area that you excel. So, and part of this is recognizing your own accomplishments and rewarding yourself. There's a lot of people who have this kind of, it's either insecurity or also fake modesty, where, they're kind of self-deprecating, which you can be, don't take yourself too seriously. You can kind of be, humorous and whatever, but recognize what you're good at and be honest with yourself. And so, because if you're not, you're not going to actually be using your best attributes, and your company is going to be missing out on your best attributes. And so, and reward yourself. If you hit certain targets, don't always say, oh, it's not enough. Say, all right, well, this was a target, and, I'm going to go out for a nice dinner. I'm going to go on holiday. I'm going to buy myself something. I've been working hard for this. Doesn't mean that I have no more goals and we're not going to go any higher, but, set milestones and reward yourself when you hit those milestones. Otherwise, if you keep on saying, oh, it's not enough. Oh yeah, but we did this, but now we have to do this. We still haven't. You're never going to be happy. It's a mindset. It's an unhealthy mindset. So these are kind of, this is more than just being an entrepreneur. A lot of these are kind of life suggestions, but certainly, again, you're taking so much responsibility when you become an entrepreneur, when you're starting something, that you really have to get this stuff. You really have to know who you are. You really have to know what you're good at. So, changing gears a little bit. So, back to the story I was telling again, I was looking at this overwhelming challenge. Everything was going wrong. And, you're looking at maybe, it's a positive story, but, looking ahead of your careers, there's still, everything's unanswered. And, it's overwhelming if you try to take everything on at once. And so the best thing to do in any scenario is, to take things step by step, break things up into more achievable goals. So as I said, the first thing I did, I found a salesperson that I could communicate and trust. And then I found an operational person and those gave me confidence. I felt like I was making progress. I could work with them. They could help me with this challenge that I was dealing with then. And, bit by bit, we overcame. And so, if you set these frequent, modest targets, you become more confident. You feel like, okay, I'm getting somewhere. Because if you look at the whole thing in its entirety, it's overwhelming, you freeze, and you don't really feel like you're making progress. But if you set little weekly targets, daily targets, and you just feel little step by little step, you are making positive, there is positive momentum, but at the same time, it has a big psychological impact on you, and you really feel like you're getting somewhere. And so that's, it's really important as an entrepreneur because, again, you're starting with nothing. You're trying to build something substantial. And, if you try to take it all on at once, it's easy to freeze. It's easy to become overwhelmed. It's easy to become, despondent. And so, but if you keep just, okay, this week we're going to do X. This week I'm going to find this person. This week we're going to, reach out to this many customers. This week we're going to get our first sale. And these little things, you start to make progress. They build the business forward, and you're getting confidence. Okay, we're doing something. And again, like when you hit those things, reward yourself. Right? We had our first sale. Let's go to dinner. Let's reward ourselves. Buy a bottle of wine. Let's do something, just to recognize that we set a target and we achieved it. And it's also important if you're running a business to do that with your team. Don't always tell them it's never enough, and don't always be critical. Recognize that was great. You said you were going to do it. You did it. At the same time, good time frame, whatever. Recognize that people do. It really helps to build a team. It really, people emotionally buy into what you're doing if you do that effectively. So, but then on the next one, the final few points are just kind of, they're not, I think, as fundamental to this, but there's some advice that I think I see a lot of younger people, maybe mistakes that they're making. I think one of, as far as emotionally involved in decision making, I think that's something we'll all work on to the day we die. I mean, it's impossible to be completely detached, emotionally detached, but emotion, blurs your decisions. And if you're making decisions for a business and they're emotionally driven, you don't like this person, I'm getting back, I want to prove this thing to this person, you're not making the right decision for the business. And these things will come back to get you. So, on a daily basis, sometimes with emails, if people piss me off or whatever, I'll let myself calm down for 24 hours before I do anything. I've learned my tricks for myself to be able to make decisions based on what I really think is right for the business, not for, anything else, not anything emotionally driven. Also with that, I think it's really a poor motivator when people use money to drive them. If you do a good job building a business, you'll do well financially. But if that's your motivator, it's very hollow because first of all, it's very one-dimensional. When you get there, then what motivates you? And so certainly, financial success or financial security is, it's a big part of run a business. But if that's all there is, again, it's not enough to allow you to really, I think, do everything that you need and to motivate other people. If your own personal wealth is what's driving you. And then the last one is maybe a weird one to have here, but be non-confrontational. You don't need to be tough. You don't need to play a role ever in business. Like find yourself, find how you're most effective. I'm most effective just being honest with people. And sometimes you put yourself in a vulnerable position. And there's other people who think you need to be tough and always look, but you know what, this works for me. And I found that it works for me because people trust me and they're open with me and they're honest with me and they don't feel like there needs to be, some contest or whatever. So that's me. But, I'm saying in addition to just that, don't, be confrontational, be respectful. Be respectful because relationships stick with you for years. You burn a bridge now and it might come back to haunt you in 5 years, 10 years. And that's one of the benefits of getting older is you see that. But these things really, you know, you take a long-term perspective on things, and you know, it's important as part of that, you know, earlier comments I was making about understanding who you are, understand what your strengths are, understand how you're most effective, and just use that. Don't try to be anybody else. Don't copy anybody else. Don't listen to, well, you have to do this to be successful in business. You have to play this way. You know, find what works for you. And if it works for you, it doesn't matter what works for anybody else. So next, I just love this quote. You know, life isn't about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. You know, all these things I'm talking about, this is all building a business, building yourself, pieces, finding out who you are, you know, understanding the components and taking these components and using them to develop yourself, you know, clarifying your, you know, your understanding of yourself. And then, you know, we're talking here about building businesses. And so, you know, if you look at it this way, you know, creating something, everything is about creation. You're empowered. You are so empowered in everything that you do. Like I continually surprise myself about how actually, you know, empowered I am, how much power, how much influence you actually could have. I would have never thought this, you know, failure of a business in Central Europe, you know, that, you know, we had an investor back out. It was, you know, we didn't even have any like sites open after working on it for a couple of years, could become like perhaps the biggest business in the world, an industry that everybody uses. And we're, you know, already building, you know, the biggest country in the world. Like it's all within your mind. It's all how you approach things. And so I like the whole, you know, philosophy of kind of creation more than, you know, finding. Finding implies, you know, it's much more passive than creating yourself. And so anyway, I stick this in here just because I think it's, you know, again, I'm talking about a lot of what's inside of you and your approach to things. And I just think this is a good way of looking at things and looking forward. So getting a little bit more, you know, focused on the business itself now, you know, and again, you know, with the same point, you know, your own behavior is the biggest driver in determining whether a business is successful. I believe I can take, you know, any idea and make a viable business. It might not be, you know, the most successful, the most profitable leader in its industry, but I believe in my capabilities enough that I can take anything and make something of it. I mean, this is now after, again, 25 years of work. So I don't mean to, you know, sound arrogant. I've done a lot now, and I've tested myself in a lot of different areas. So, you know, it's that belief in yourself and that belief that, you know, your own attitude is the most important thing. Your, you know, ability, your belief that you can do things, your determination to overcome challenges. This really is the biggest factor in determining. It's not your product. It's not, you know, the quality of what, you know, it's not the industry you're in. You can, because if you have the skills yourself, you can kind of make the rest of that work. So again, starting with passion, you know, again, and it relates all to the same thing, that you're driving everything. And so if you are indifferent about the industry, the business, what you're doing, you're never going to have what it takes. So the first step in anything with starting a business is really something that, you know, you have some passion. And again, like with the car wash business, it doesn't have to be with the service itself or the business itself, the product itself. You know, we have a business that actually sells like bathroom products around Europe. I mean, it's like, you know, toilet sanitizers and stuff. I can tell you I don't have much passion for that. But that business, we're building a logistics network all around Europe. And for me, that's something that's a really cool and interesting challenge. So that, you know, I can get passionate about that. I can get interested. But, you know, the first real step is then to loosely define the business that you want to create. You need, you know, the reason why it's loosely is because if you define it too much too early, you're creating a business for yourself. So, I mean, with Splash, the first idea I had was really just the business that had pissed me off. It was a hand wash in a parking garage of a shopping mall. So that was what I was thinking I'll do. I'll just do it better. But I only, you know, I didn't execute that business. The next step I did was research. And I realized that there was all these other business models out there, all these other ways to do this service. And I talked to a lot of people. I talked to customers, potential customers. I talked to people in the industry and other markets. And I learned a hell of a lot. And I completely reinvented the business. And you know, it became then, we want to be, you know, I saw with these models, these, you know, full service car washes with tunnels. These are in the US, Germany. And so the business then became, I want to be the guy who brings this to Central Europe, and then I want to be the guy who brings this to China. We opened the very first tunnel wash in all of China. So, you know, so it was that process and only that process that allowed me to really create, what is becoming an industry-changing business. But at the same time, you can't become too emotionally attached to your ideas. So you do research, you listen, you get feedback. But if you're too stuck to what you originally wanted to do, there's no point in doing all of that. So you really have to listen, and you'll find you keep hearing some themes. And when you hear things that are different than what you want or that you were thinking, and you hear it regularly, you should really recognize, okay, I'm not building this business for myself. If I only have, I need customers to support this business. And so I really need to be building what the market wants, not what I want. And I've gotten to that point. My opinion is the least important in regards to my business. I don't care what things look like, what I want things to look like, what I want as far as advertising stuff. I care what has the biggest impact. I care what my customers, want. What's going to get me the most business? So, there's been times where I've just swallowed hard and we've done things I really don't like because I realize that my opinion is in the minority. So, the other thing with all of this is it takes some time. So you can't just rush. You have to, you start with the idea, but you really have to take this process seriously. And it depends on the business. Some, if you're developing an app, you might be able to fairly quickly be able to make, get some feedback and, modify whatever your plan was and launch it. Other things, Splash, I started with a knowledge base of 0 and had to teach myself the industry and then modified what I learned based on what I realized would work better for what we were trying to achieve. And so this was like a years-long process. And I wasn't impatient, and my goal was just to build the strongest business I could, not to get it done quickly. And so that's really, I think, what helped us to build what we've built. So, I say, the feedback, it's what I call the feedback loop. It's like, you have to ask the right questions, but then, and you have to be going to the right enough sources and diverse sources, but then you have to really be internalizing what you hear. And so it's this loop. And then you don't just do it once, you do it multiple times. Okay, so I've modified the business based on what I've heard, and then I talk to these people again. And you hear, is this closer to what you think works? Or you talk to different people, who maybe you talk to, lawyers also, because can I do this? Can I legally do this? Will there be challenges if we do something this way? You talk to all sorts of different people, whatever, is most relevant for the business you're doing. So I use the analogy, it's like making a sword. You start with a chunk of metal, and, depending on how many times you heat it and hammer it, heat it and hammer it, that sword becomes stronger and more lethal. And so, the business, I think it's a perfect analogy for building a business, because maybe your original idea, like that chunk of metal, was enough to, hit somebody and hurt them. And so it's, there's something there that would have gotten you business, maybe it would support itself. It could be a viable business. But to really make that lethal sword, that really killer weapon, that business that really dominates and is really successful, you have to do this a number of times. And the more you do this, the stronger it becomes, because you're taking in, this is free knowledge. This is free. Instead of building the business and having to make changes later, you're doing this now once, for free. And you can make changes without anybody having to see. You don't have to lose face. So it's a really, it's to your benefit too. So forget that, it was your idea versus somebody else's idea. When you go public with it, it all looks like your idea, and you could benefit from all this other feedback you got to strengthen what you had. So again, I think you always remember that sword analogy, where the more you do, the more they heat and hammer it, the stronger that is. And it's the same thing. The more ideas, more feedback you incorporate, the stronger your business model will be before you launch the business. So, the statistic differs slightly in different, but roughly 95% of all businesses fail within their first year. And, but I believe firmly that most of these failures are avoidable. It's really your approach. And I actually believe that ratio could probably be inverted. Not to say that 95% of businesses are going to be, market leaders and, everything's going to be the next Google, but this is, you can make a business that can support itself if you take that process seriously enough, because you've incorporated the feedback from enough customers, enough, partners, enough investors, whatever, that by the time you're going to market with it or launching it, you're doing what people are telling you should do. And so they're much more likely to invest in it, much more likely to use it. So you control all of that. And so, again, you have a huge impact on how likely this business is to succeed based on what you put into that initial process. So, you know, this is why I believe the execution is far more important than the idea. You know, a strong, skilled entrepreneur can make any business fly. But, you know, I've seen a number of times, especially when I was doing venture capital, people bringing amazing ideas to us, but they were terrible managers and they had no idea how to run a business. And, you know, we'd never touch those. And so, you know, you could take this revolutionary idea, but if the people who don't know how to do it, don't know how to actually execute it, you're never going to do it. But somebody brings in, like, you know, okay, fine, you know, you've seen something like this, this makes sense idea, but you really believe that this person, you know, could drive it and can make this thing happen, you're going to invest in that one, or you're going to work for that person. So, you know, while, you know, you know, behind the idea of, you know, you think of an entrepreneur and you think of somebody who takes an idea and executes it and turns it into a business, it's really the process of doing that is so much more important than the idea itself. So, you know, and this is where, you know, touching on what I was saying before, you know, you've got to listen to other people because nobody cares about your dreams. You know, you get all worked up on it, you get emotionally tied into it, but customers aren't going to buy your products, investors aren't going to invest in your business because of these things. And so the business itself has to make sense. No matter how much they like you, you know, they're going to take you out for dinner, but then they're going to still tell you, sorry, I'm not going to invest. So, you know, it's, you got to listen, you got to incorporate that information, you got to take it to heart. So, you know, one of the main reasons businesses fail, again, and this is the entrepreneur doing too much in their own mind and not listening and not reaching out, is that, you know, you're not actually addressing a real problem. There's not a real opportunity out there. You're addressing something that you care about, that you've thought about, but maybe nobody else does, or not enough people to really support a business. And so, you know, this happens a lot, and this is why so many of these businesses fail, because you launch something that you know you care deeply about, and nobody shows up. And so, you know, again, I've explained to you how you can avoid it, but it's something to really be cognizant of. You know, is this a business? Is there, you know, enough people who will spend money on this to support something? And so, you know, then the approach you take. I mean, I walked through that startup, but I'm a very visual learner, and you know, I think of things, you know, it's like building a building. You know, to build a business is the same thing. You have to have a strong foundation. And so if that foundation isn't strong, it's very difficult to build anything of value, anything, you know, of substance on it. And so, you know, you should be focused, and it should be simple, and it should be straightforward and easily achievable at the beginning. And then start adding the more complicated things onto that. Because if you try too much too early, you're going to weaken that foundation. And I'll tell you, you're probably not going to get investment either, because if you go to investors and you ramble through a whole bunch of stuff and it sounds kind of, you know, like too much, they're going to say, this person doesn't focus, they don't know, you know, and I'm not going to put my money on somebody who's actually, you know, doesn't understand, you know, the process for building something and doesn't have a focus themselves, because it's too risky for me. I'll come on board, maybe 90% chance they fail, 10% chance they succeed, I'll invest later. So that, you know, starting simple, starting with something that you could achieve, starting something that's manageable, even if you have really much higher aspirations, that first step isn't that exciting and doesn't really, it's not what you want to do it. You know, get that foundation built, and then you can start, you know, building levels on top of it. And you can, get more complicated once people kind of buy in, and once you've proven the concept, proven yourself. So, you know, it's really essential that you're methodical. That's another thing as a venture capitalist I saw people really surprised by. They think we want to be wowed with the complexity and all the things you can do with it. It's the exact opposite. So this person has no focus. They want to do 10 things at once. They're going to waste their money. Every time something new comes up, they're going to change direction. You know, so if you just say, boom, this is the core business, then, you know, once we do this, we're going to do this. Say this, all right, this person gets it. They're not going to waste my money. They're not going to take on too much risk. So that's I think, again, another thing I saw people were quite you know, surprised by, the way that, you know, investors think, and really the way to do something effectively. And part of all of this, you know, businesses, you know, it's money, it's numbers. And so, you know, you need to do those numbers yourself. You need to be honest with yourself about the cost of doing things. And people do back of the envelope, and they always underestimate the cost. That's why businesses are always more expensive. And also they underestimate the time period. And, you spend monthly, you're spending, for people, for, services and this and that. And so, it adds up. And so you really need to focus on the numbers, because first of all, that might have a big impact on how you approach things, but that's going to get confidence, and that might change your thinking, and cause you, might smack you in the face and teach you how you need to be more conservative with some of this stuff, because you don't have the money or access to money to do all of this stuff. And so you need to focus on this core part, which will then start generating some revenues and allow you to then, help pay for some of the other more expensive parts of the business. But really, you can't gloss over doing the numbers. And then another comment, especially to your generation, and it's good that there's this kind of the startup culture now, and failure isn't, a badge of dishonor like it was before. I mean, people kind of wear it proudly, the things they were part of, which is good, but I've seen a lot of people getting carried away with it. So we'll move on. The problem is most of the time you're using other people's money. And so if you just have a cavalier attitude about, using investors' money, and you burn through it and say, it doesn't matter, we'll learn from this you're not going to get those people to invest again. Also, you might, if you waste a year of people's time, colleagues and stuff, you might find it difficult to get partners, get employees. So treat everything as if, everything rides on it. I mean, because I wouldn't put $1 behind anybody who doesn't. But at the same time, if it doesn't work, don't slink, don't hang your head down and never, have the confidence to start anything again. You really do learn much more from failure than you do from successes. But, so you have to have a healthy attitude and understand that there's a balance there. So, and the final thing there is another reason why most companies fail is that they don't clearly communicate. Even if you have a clear identity, people make very quick decisions whether or not they're going to use a service, use a business. And you have to understand that. You have to be, before you're a recognized name, you have to really understand what attributes people are evaluating you on, and you have to be able to communicate those quickly, and they have to be consistent. You can't be serving Michelin star food in a new restaurant with, McDonald's style furniture. So it has to make sense. It has to all be, and people have to, they read, most of it's subconscious. And so if you have that combination wrong, no matter how good the idea is, you're still more likely to fail than not. And then, so my last slide, and I know we're getting close to an hour here, relates to the financing, because every business needs investment. And even if you are independently wealthy, you can finance your business yourself. Very few people want to. First of all, because of risk, spreading your risk. And also it's because other people, when they have skin in the game, they bring something else to the table. They might bring knowledge, they might bring expertise. And so you want that as an entrepreneur. You want somebody's contact network, you might want their reputation, you might want, the experience they had in building a business in your industry. And so this bringing in investors allows you to do this. And so I've been fortunate in what I'm doing, in that I started my whole career on the investor side, and I was doing it from Wall Street, billion-dollar stuff, down to small startups in seed financing stuff in Central Europe. Most people don't have that full scope of experience, and so if you're an entrepreneur and you want to do something, you really have to understand how the investor's mind works, and you're going to go through a lot of different stages, and I've spelled them out here. Founders, this is from the beginning, so it's the founders funding it, your friends and family, seed funding, VC funding, banks, private equity, public markets. This is really kind of the evolution of a business, and the motivation for each of these investors is completely different. What they bring to the table is different, and what you want from them is different. In early stage, as I was saying before, you want more than just the money. You want their experience, you want their network, you want their reputation, to help you to build the business. Once the business is mature, you just want their money. You don't need somebody's Rolodex. We've already proven ourselves. We have a vast Rolodex. I don't need your contacts. And so you have to understand, how this equation works at each stage. You have to understand, what comes with the money, what you need with the money. And then also you have to understand what you're giving up for it, because at different stages, people are, looking for something different. And this is driven by risk reward, which is another thing here, I've listed, and it's something you really have to get your head around if you're raising money, is, people are taking a much bigger risk before you're proven, and so they're looking for much greater reward. So you have to fairly, price, fairly value the business. If you're already proven, you can be much more aggressive with the valuation because they are quite confident that the business will, survive and endure, and they'll get something back from it. And so this, again, there's at different stages of the business and different types of investors, there's a very different calculation on the investor side. So what you really need to do, and a lot of entrepreneurs are very poor at this, is putting yourself in other people's shoes. I mean, I need to do this on a daily basis. I need to do this with customers. I need to do it with people we want to hire. I need to do it with investors. But certainly with investors, understand how they view your business. And sometimes it's very hard to step out of something that you've been working on, every day, every hour for months or for even years. But they see it differently, and sometimes they just don't have your knowledge, certainly don't have your confidence. And so you have to be able to step into their shoes and take on their perspective. And if you do that effectively, then you can convince them effectively. And along the lines of convincing, one of the things I learned going from being an investor to an entrepreneur is no investor acts alone. Even if you're talking to a high net worth individual, they're going to talk to their husband or wife about, should I do this? This is our money, or, if it's an investment firm, they're going to talk to their partners. And a lot of times those partners, that husband and wife, aren't part of the calls, aren't part of the meetings. So they have to go back and summarize your business and why they think it's worth putting their money in. And so if you don't have a clear story, and if you're jumping all around, even if you get them very excited, they're going to then turn around and their wife or their husband's going to say, okay, so tell me about it. Why should we? Well, this, and you're going to kind of, you're not going to remember. And the other person's going to go, okay. But if you tell it like a story and you think, okay, this person is going to have to repeat this. They don't really know much about it, but they're going to have to repeat it. So how can I tell it to a way that's easy for them to repeat? So you tell it like a story and like a logical progression of things. And so that's easy. Then they can go back and tell, their partners, oh, this, and then this, and then this. And if you make this logical progression of things and things that are kind of, rationally linked to each other, and that, it's a progression and it tells like a story, then they'll do a very effective job, and they're more likely to get their partners on board or their spouse on board, which is more likely to get you a yes for what, for whether or not they're going to invest. And so that's really an important way. And I see a lot of people making this mistakes is they kind of jump around, and I'm thinking I have to go back and tell my partners about this. And I like the idea, but how do I summarize this? How am I going to repeat this in a convincing manner? So if you do that for them, you've dramatically increased your likelihood of getting investment. And the last point is, and this isn't natural for an for an entrepreneur, but investors always are thinking about their exit. You don't put your money into something that you don't know how you can get it out. Because, if it's a family business, you're going to do it forever, you're going to pass it on to your kids. But if I'm an investor, I'm giving you money for a period of time that I want to get back with, hopefully, a premium. And so I'm going to ask you, how am I going to get my money back? And, so you need to understand that as you're building a business, your investors are going to be looking to get their money back. So whether you're going to sell the business, whether you're going to refinance it, whether you're going to take it public, whether you're going to sell it to a private equity group, these are important. And the more information you have about this, again, the more comfort they'll be more comfortable, because they're not going to, they give you a long time horizon. It's usually 5 to 7 years, but they're not going to just throw money your way and just hope, okay, I get returns. How am I going to get my returns? I know how you're going to make your money, but how as an investor am I going to make my money? So again, that's one of the, having sat with a lot of investment funds, we will not touch anything that we don't have a clear exit. So no matter how good the idea is, how much we like the management, if they don't know how they're going to actually get us out of the business after a couple of years, we actually won't do it. And that's, again, it's not intuitive. So that is my little slideshow there. So I've talked now for about an hour, or more, sorry. But I don't know what questions you guys have. We can ask some of this format. Also, you guys can find me on LinkedIn. You can see my name there. That's how it is in LinkedIn. So you can send me stuff there too if you want to fire off a question. Personally. Okay.
So I got some questions. First, thanks so much for the presentation. It was really informative. So the first question was, what was your day-to-day like before the pandemic, and what's it like now?
I've been lucky lucky. Well, first of all, my day-to-day before the pandemic was I was in China, but we've kind of, the way our business is divided, I don't speak Chinese. All of our customers are Chinese, all of our employees are Chinese, so I don't really have an operational role. I'm responsible for strategy, fundraising, and managing our external relationships. And so I can do that remotely. And I travel a lot anyway. I mean, last year I flew 250,000 miles. And so, I'm used to moving around. So it was, in China, we had 3 weeks of shutdown. And so surprisingly, we have two site models. The ones where people are, doing interiors and stuff, obviously we had to close that. Surprisingly, people were using the fully automated machines during the pandemic, which kind of shocked me. But so for me personally, it's actually been pretty nominal, except for the fact that I haven't been able to go back to China. And the US is a bit of a, well, watch my language, but it's a bit of a mess right now. But a lot of the world is kind of calmed down, and I was scared that investors would stop and invest, and that everybody will to see how things have played out. But actually, people are kind of getting back to normal. I mean, certainly certain industries are being hit, but the investment world has gotten right back on track, and in certain industries, and a lot of companies are getting back. So it's more encouraging than I thought. Although of course things could take left turn again. So anyway, that's my day to day. I was responsible for those stuff for each of the businesses that I'm involved. Strategy, finance.
Awesome. So I just got another one. What tips or skills would you recommend to acquire the cultural intelligence to do business and negotiate to manage an international business and working abroad?
No, that's a great question. I mean, certainly, obviously, exposure. You have to be around, but it's but beyond that, there's a mindset. I think I've been to 110 countries. I've worked in, I don't know, I've lived in 5. I think I've worked in probably a dozen. So, I have a lot of experience with this. And I think one of the most important lessons to draw is to really, be respectful. Because there's a fine line between, I mean, what I've done is my businesses have been bringing, kind of business models from developed markets into developing markets. And so parts of it, there is, I have to stand firm in that this is how this business works. It's my ideas. You guys are, looking at businesses that actually aren't underdeveloped or are working. And so you have to learn where to stand firm. But other areas, you have to understand where there's cultural differences. And the good news is that most of the world is the same. People want the same things. Car wash, people want good service. They want a clean environment. They want, fast service. They want affordable. People, a lot of people will tell you, oh, China's so different. Czech Republic's so different. They're not. 98% of who we are is the same. And so, but you have to be able to understand where there are some behavioral lines, and it's going to be different for different industries. But, so you have to put the effort into learning that and respecting that, and learning that there's certain, again, depending on the business, depending on the culture, there's areas where you just need to follow local customs. Even in the car wash industry, certain cultures just want to step out of the car and want to have everything done for them. Other places like Germany, the people don't want to be inconvenienced. They want to stay in the car the whole time, have stuff done. So you've got to learn where there's kind of different behaviors, and you're not going to you can't force people against their comfort zone. So you can't make German customers get out of the car and be happy about it. You can't. Likewise, you're not going to get Chinese or Russian customers to do stuff by themselves. And so, you have to, so I identify the differences, respect the differences. And that's, I think, the best, so, it's really that, take seriously try to educate yourself. But realize at the core, most people are the same and want the same thing.
Awesome. And so we have time for one more question. So this one is, as you mentioned before, one should find their comfort zone. When should we start exploring what zone fits us, for instance, the career path?
So, I mean, I think you guys, I mean, you're already, well, okay, that's a great question. I mean, you have to be exposed to enough things, because I think the people who, I find fault in are the ones who draw too much from any limited experience. I mean, I know, you know, I had a girlfriend in high school whose parents don't even have passports. They've never left. And you know, I've been to 110 countries. I talk to them. I say, you know what? Because America's the best place. We don't need to go anywhere else. Well, how do you know that? You know, so if you draw too much on your experience and not tested experience, you know, other things. And so I would, you know, you should be a sponge at your stage and through college and really honestly through your 20s. Like, I think through your, you know, only in your 30s do you really start applying. And you have to, so what your goal should be is exposing yourself to as many experiences, opportunities, you know, situations. And if there's something that you really think you're interested in, test it. I was running the recruiting when I was in investment banking. I was running intern recruiting. And we recruited at Dartmouth and at Penn. And the people that we would always ding without hesitation were the ones who told us they were passionate. They always wanted to do investment banking. And then we talked to them more about it, and they didn't know anything about it. They never talked to anybody. They never did any research. It's like, how can you be passionate about something that you actually, you know, put no effort into to exploring? And so take college and explore. Take your first jobs and build your toolkit. And only once you've been in certain situations, you'll start to see, you know, multiple times, you'll start to see patterns. Because I discovered sides of myself that I never knew I had. I discovered sides of myself that I never would have ever discovered if I just stayed in New York and did private equity and never left that market. You know, I would have missed 98% of what my life is now, what my personality is now. And so you can't rush that stuff. It's really, it's time. And so, and don't draw too many conclusions from first exposure to things. Oh, I hate this. Oh, I'm bad at this. I was not confident in finance when I was a Wharton because I was surrounded by a bunch of people who came from families, they were exposed to this, and they had all these, years and years of learning about it, and you know, maybe more aptitude in, you know, some of the skill set too. And so I was really not terribly confident in my skill set. I got to Wall Street. I wound up doing well because they ranked us by bonus, and I did well. And I realized, okay, my skill set might not match some of these people, and they did better in the classroom environment, but I obviously have something good. And there's something about me that function, you know, works with this. And so I started to try to understand what that was. And then, you know, you take yourself out of that environment, go to another, and, you know, only then when you kind of in a totally different situation, then you can test some of those theories about yourself. And so it's, you know, I would say through your 20s, just explore and experiment and test and learn, and find mentors and ask questions, and don't get down on yourself if you do, you know, don't draw too many conclusions about yourself too early. And so only once you're in your 30s, I think, is that really do you start applying. So hopefully that answers the question.
All right, so that's all we have time for. So thank you all for coming, and thank you so much to Rob for taking the time out of your schedule to give us a great presentation. If you have any unanswered questions for Rob, feel free to message them to me or any of the board members through our Discord or to Rob on LinkedIn. Also, Mr. Shesol welcomes any of our members to connect with him on LinkedIn. So thanks again, Rob. Have a great day, everyone, and I hope to see you all soon.
All right, thank you all for your time. Enjoy. Take care.
Thanks, Rob.
All right, thanks, Ray.